Welcome back to the My Online Schooling podcast, the place where we talk to staff, parents and pupils to find out more about life at the online school. In this episode, we speak to Sam Palmer, geography teacher at My Online Schooling. Sam elaborates on his Eureka moments in teaching, what a typical day looks like for him as a geography teacher, and how the school has developed since the day he joined. But we're also going to find out where in the world Sam would like to visit one day. I wonder if you can guess where he might like to go. So come with me and listen in on this conversation with Sam Palmer. Sam, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me to chat today. It's been quite a busy day, actually, just preparing material for tomorrow. I kick off first thing with our Year 8 geography group, who are currently studying natural hazards,
okay,
which is a firm favourite among all of our year groups, actually.
What sort of things are included in natural hazards then?
I mean, we start talking about the structure of the Earth, plate tectonics, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, risk, mitigation. So we try to touch on, because it's a double unit, so we try to touch on everything that is actually helpful up at year 10 when they get into the GCSEs.
And I guess as well that some of the pupils that you're teaching are from parts of the world where tsunamis are not an uncommon thing, where volcanoes are nearby as well, that kind of thing. Is that right?
Yes, we have students from over 17 different countries, sorry. So in some cases, they've experienced firsthand or know of natural hazards locally. And education, as we know, has a very big role to play in mitigation of natural hazards and vulnerability and risk. So it's always a popular unit, natural hazards.
So I'm just going to jump in with a quick question on that straight away, if you don't mind. Do you find that is a better learning experience for the students in the class, given that they're able to hear firsthand from someone who's experienced some of these things that they're learning about in theory?
Whenever you have a first-hand experience, it's always going to be a more enriched learning experience for the student, or students in general, because they're hearing first-hand experiences. We show a video based on a Japanese earthquake in which the guy's walking through the park and you can see the land around him is waving, is like a wave rippling through the land. And that is often gives better impact because it's a first-hand witnessed account than something that we can show from YouTube or another source. The fact that he's holding the camera, he's talking about feeling queasy and how he felt sick as the earthquake passed underneath him. It's always going to be a stronger learning experience. Students take a lot more away from that interaction than they do from me talking or from just watching a generic video.
Okay, well, we're going to come on to geography in a few minutes, but I've been really looking forward to this episode, Sam, to hear from another teacher point of view what life is like at the school. But before we do that, could you take us through a quick summary of your own education, sort of where you grew up and what your first job was after you left school yourself?
I grew up in Somerset, in the southwest of England. I went to a local comprehensive school locally, and I didn't really have an interest in geography, particularly at school. It was very, very boring, if you like, because it just seemed to be talking about maps and colouring and all those things that people think geography is. Yeah. And it wasn't until when I left school, I got a job working at Cheddar Caves as a tourist guide.
Oh yeah.
Spending a lot of time in the cave, and from the tour guiding, I then progressed on to cave leading. So I was actually taking people caving. And as they asked questions about the cave, so I would find out information to assist with the interpretation. And that's where the love for geography was really born. And then, of course, I went on to university here locally as well. When I finished university, I moved to Spain, where I was lucky enough to kind of study semi-arid environments as well, semi-arid river systems. And while in Spain, I was teaching English as a foreign language and geography as well. And then I took a position with my own schooling, and it kind of all took off from there, really. The passion was born while working in the caves, for sure.
Okay, so what led you to teaching then in an online schooling environment?
That's a very good question. I mean, it was the challenge, I think. The challenge of taking a lesson that works, that works perfectly in a mainstream or physical setting, and working out how that lesson would work in an online setting where you don't necessarily have the peer-to-peer interaction. You don't necessarily be able to see the student's face to see whether they've understood or they've digested. And it's the challenge of being an online teacher as opposed to a mainstream physical teacher.
So how did you combat that challenge in that case?
There tend to be two ways of doing this. I mean, you can either, if you have to give a worksheet, you give the worksheet as a group activity, so that we all feedback answers, we all deal with the problem at the same time, and then you take answers from the students, or you send out a worksheet which is then returned within the same lesson period, and you go through an evaluation process with that worksheet. So there's the two strategies that I use depending on the material. I prefer the group approach because everybody gets to have their say, everybody gets to tell me their point of view. And that's another big difference, I think, between some mainstream schools and us, is that we welcome students to really tell us what they think. We have time to kind of take their feedback and take their opinions on subjects.
Interesting. Can you give me an example of how that's been useful and beneficial to an individual student in one of your classes?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to basic teaching theory, where we use a process of scaffolding. So in theory, everybody knows something about the subject that we're talking. It's very uncommon to not know something. For example, if we're talking about natural hazards, then everybody's heard or come across or heard or knows through the news that natural hazards occur, and they occur in different parts of the earth. And it's taking what they know, and in some cases either kind of just changing that knowledge or updating that knowledge, giving the student the tools that they need to then build and construct on that base, that foundation themselves. So they almost come to the realization themselves. We call it the Eureka moment, when the idea just snaps into the child's head. I had an example last week with one of my Year 10 classes, where we were talking about why we position a type of industry where we position it. It's called a footloose industry. And we tend to find these footloose industries on the outskirts of cities, on the outskirts of the urban areas. I'm talking away to the class, and she suddenly writes in the chat box, I understand this now. I haven't understood why we place this industry there, but now it's all kind of just fallen into place for me, and I get it. And that's one of those moments, one of those Eureka moments for us, where the student has used past knowledge of urban structures and built upon that past knowledge to arrive to a new conclusion.
So how does that make you feel as a teacher when you witness a child experiencing one of those Eureka moments?
That's why we get into teaching, I think, is because that point where the road is clear, they're making sense of the material themselves. We tend to have students that do question the information that they receive, and that's fantastic because it produces very independently led students. But occasionally it's almost like they're missing a tile, and they just need that little bit of extra information, or they need to discover that little bit of extra information themselves, and they're away. And it's just, it's one of those moments, and the adrenaline starts to rush, and you get more and more excited, and you start talking a little bit fast perhaps, and you kind of just have to pinch yourself and say, okay, that was one step. Let's reach the next one now. Let's push that knowledge outwards some more. Let's stretch that a little bit more. So it's constantly climbing a mountain, but it's well worth it.
Sam, talk me through a typical day as a teacher at My Online Schooling, if you don't mind, and also if you could highlight any differences in a typical day that you experience compared to any previous experiences in teaching in a bricks and mortar kind of traditional school.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very compressed timetable, so the days are incredibly busy, which is suits me down to the ground because we're so used to, or our students are so used to having fast information that we do need to kind of deliver lessons at maybe a faster than normal pace for them. But it's not beyond their capability. But a typical day, I do the preparation the night before. Not always. I check the preparation is done, and then we'll log into class. And of course, one of the major differences is that the children rotate around us rather than us rotating around a room or around a group of students. We take a second, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of each class to find out how the students are, to connect with the students, to find out about their weekend or what they did the night before. The conversation mostly goes to gaming because that's an interest that I have and I share with a lot of students. And then we'll deliver the lesson. Normally, I deliver all my secondary lessons in a block, and then lunch, and then I have my upper stage lessons followed by my lower stage lessons in the afternoons. It's a fast-paced day, but I quite enjoy once you start. You just go on through, and it's fun and it's exciting as well.
And is this your first position teaching at an online school?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how your teaching at an online school like My Online Schooling differs from your time teaching when you were in Spain.
I build connections better with the children online, oddly enough.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
A lot of our students choose not to put their cameras on. A lot of our students choose not to speak on the microphone, and that's absolutely fine. I never push a student. I never make a requirement for the student. And it's like when I can't see your face, you're more likely to open up in a way because you feel protected, you feel safe. We strip away all the stresses of school buses and school run and the busyness of their days. We strip that away as well. So we can build the connection stronger with them, which allows us to assess them better because we very quickly understand what the student is kind of capable of in terms of their academic performance. And we get to know them as well, very well, better than I ever could in the mainstream classroom, I think.
Gosh, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting.
So tell me a little bit more about pupil engagement in class, how you get the pupils to open up. You just mentioned about them opening up. How do you go about doing that in a typical geography lesson?
Geography is an interesting subject that there are... The general feeling I have is that if you talk about something that interests the student, that at some point that student will get involved in the conversation. And once they've made that step of involvement, they tend not to go back to being quiet students. They tend to kind of broken that barrier. So initially in that 2 or 3 minutes of chat at the beginning, it could be something to do with gaming, or if we're talking geography, then it could be normally things around climate change or sustainability are very good at increasing student engagement, because again, it's something that we all have opinions about. It's something that is in the news currently. I have that dramatic flair where I tell the students that it's down to them now. We've made the mess, and now it's down to them. They are in, as has been reported in the media, they're in a fight for survival. And it's just that little flair of dramatic nature that helps them to involve themselves in the conversation, help involve themselves in what's going on in the classroom. I also ask questions directly to the students as well. So if I know, for example, that the student is very strong on climate change, then I will direct the question to them so that they can have their say. And like I said, it tends to snowball from there. Something will interest the student enough to open up their microphone or to turn the camera on. We have a lot of interaction through the chat box as well, which is a very important part of what we do, because students don't need to put themselves out there. They can use the chat box or the microphone. That's a little added layer of security for them as well, I think.
So do you find then that students may put something in a chat box that they may well otherwise not feel comfortable about saying on a microphone?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I also teach personal social health education. In those settings, when we're talking about how the human body works, for example, the preferred method for the student then is to talk on the chat, and they can put messages out to me. That's, in some cases, I can only see that the rest of the students in the class can't. And it's a nice way to kind of share what they're thinking without attempting or risking in their mind negative feedback from other students. We have an incredibly supportive school community, which is based on difference and the fact that we are all different. And it's that difference, especially from a geographical point of view, that difference that makes the school work. That difference is celebrated within us. So, yeah, students will use the chat box to put across opinions, and they know that opinion will be included in the lesson from our point of view. And it gives them that extra layer of security, especially when students have had a history of anxiety or school refusal, that they're not going to be singled out or picked on for what they want to say.
Sam, in your time of working at My Online Schooling, how have you seen the school develop and change since day one until now?
Day one, it did have a kind of a Wild West feeling about it. We were all kind of teaching from different strands and different material, and we've certainly become more coordinated. We work closely together. The faculties now work much closer together, and we plan collaboratively between us as well, so we can hit the curriculum from multiple angles. So I work very closely with the English department and the science department as well.
Okay.
That allows us to kind of lay in the material to make sure that we try to all kind of hit that material at the same time, which in the case of science and geography, we take it from different angles, because geography is sometimes about the human, where science can sometimes be, it's always about the physical as well. And that in itself gives a better position for the students, well, a better idea for the students. We started off very, very specialist as well, with children who had struggled at secondary school, students who were looking for the last attempt, in some cases, to stay in education. My first GCSE student just couldn't go to school. No matter how hard his parents tried, he would not go to school. And I was teaching him for a whole year, and he left. He took away a really, really good grade. And then later on, of course, with COVID, it's almost like we've gone more mainstream. We've gone away from being a specialist provision and becoming a mainstream provision. And that's fantastic, because we've seen student numbers increase. We've seen new teachers coming into the school as well to bolster the current team to keep up with demand. There's job opportunities created in Edinburgh as well, which is where My Online Schooling is based. And we're giving back as well to the community in general.
Sam, I've asked you various questions about the school and about your teaching at the school, but I'd love to ask just a couple of questions about yourself, actually. What would you say is the best thing about being a teacher working at My Online Schooling from your own point of view?
It's meeting people from all over the world, those 70 countries.
Gosh, yeah.
Because they all have different ideas. For example, we've just passed Ramadan, and explaining the basis of Ramadan to students who don't live in the Middle East, for example, or aren't Middle Eastern students, for example, is a fantastic way of sharing culture. And when we share culture, we gain an understanding of each other. Yeah. And that then deals with problems around or gender equality and all of things that we can tackle in the future, because we understand how we work as a group together. It's that, and it's also learning from them as well. Whether it's learning the latest piece of slang that's being used in the games chat rooms or whatever. We are constantly learning from the students and learning about their culture, as in youth culture or teen culture, and it keeps you feeling very, very young. I mean, I'm not old, but we feel very close to the students because of that, because we have this crossover.
That's great to hear. Then lastly, ignoring COVID, tell me 3 countries you've never been to but you would like to visit one day.
My students speak very fondly of Dubai, for example.
Okay.
And I would quite like to see Dubai. I think it's
okay. So
a
Dubai is number one.
It's the city itself, whatever. Canada. I have a student who lives in Africa, but he was born in Canada.
Okay.
And Canada has to be one as well, and Africa too. We have a fair few students from the continent.
And which part of Africa would you choose?
Yeah, it would be probably South Africa, just to see
South
penguins.
Africa. Yeah. Excellent. So we'll go for Dubai, we'll go for Canada, we'll go for South Africa.
Bit of a mix there, sorry, but yeah.
I like that. That's good. That is good. Sam, we need to bring this to a close in a moment, but for anyone who's heard anything and might have a follow-up question, what's the best way for them to get in touch with the school?
We have a live chat function on our website, which students or anybody is welcome to use. And I mean, I assume that our marketing department or our administration departments can be contacted through the website as well.
Okay.
We actually have all of our teacher bios on the website too, so people can read up a little bit more.
Oh, that sounds fun.
About the teaching staff as well.
Great place to find out more about the teachers.
Exactly. The website is the first place.
Well, look, thank you so much for being here with us today and for being so willing to open up and share your own experience of working at My Online Schooling. Thank you for your time, Sam.
No, thank you very much for your time.
So that was Sam Palmer, geography teacher at My Online Schooling, talking about his experience of working there. Thank you, Sam, for coming on to this episode of the podcast. Now, don't forget, you can always get in touch with the school by searching My Online Schooling. But also, if you haven't followed this channel yet, then now's the time to do so. Because then when each episode is released, you'll just receive a small notification to let you know that it's available. So go and do that now. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to this episode, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.